say, I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Where there's people, there is power. Justice in our time. Good evening, everyone. Another episode of Equal Star, and I have an esteemed member again, guest, Chloe. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? Because obviously we're not too familiar.
So I am a journalist. I've been a journalist for over 15 years. I've worked in events. I've done entertainment, current affairs, travel. I do a lot of stuff in foreign affairs and stuff, particularly like in Jamaica. I do a lot of PR stuff. I've worked for different companies as a PR manager. I've worked for City Splash Festival, Reggae Land Festival, doing a lot of media related stuff. And so, yeah, I'm just a kind of all round creative and someone who's very opinionated.
Yeah, well, that's what we need. That's why I invited you on. Fun enough, I graduated in journalism. I've never had the career that you've had. See, so I need to get some tips. Yeah, so I can, upgrade the writing and get some of them kind of gigs you're getting.
Yeah, man, no problem.
But going to the questions I sent you beforehand. So what do you think about this gender war business in terms of misandry and misogyny?
That's a loaded question. But I think when it comes to sort of like gender relations and I guess the sort of like war that's been created amongst when we speak, are we speaking in terms of our community, or are we speaking in a wider sense?
I'm more talking about that as nationally, as a nation.
Okay, so I think if we're talking about it sort of like nationally, I think that it's a problem that obviously has existed for a long time, and I think it's kind of magnified now because of things like social media, and just media in general. People have an opinion, and everyone has access to a phone, and everyone can be opinionated and has a platform to kind of speak about how they feel. I think a lot of the conflict that we have is kind of like, it's, how can I say? I don't feel like people are really hearing each other. I don't feel like men are really hearing women, and I don't think women are really hearing men. And I think that a lot of the time the message gets lost in the fight. And I think if I'm being 100% transparent, I think that I think there's an imbalance, unfortunately, because I think that there are laws and certain sort of protective sort of like boundaries and boundaries that kind of protect women in a way that it doesn't really protect men. And I think that there are sort of initiatives and conversations and laws that are being passed that, like I said, do protect women, that I feel like kind of disadvantaged men a lot. And I feel like men get a bad rap a lot of the time.
We do.
I think men get a bad rap, and so, I think when we speak about feminism, I'm not somebody who is like a massive advocate for feminism as a concept. And, it's something obviously that was created sort of like in the 60s as part of a movement, and to advocate for women, specifically for European women. And I feel like I'm not going to speak about, the politics around when it was created back then, because obviously I wasn't around. But I definitely feel like in more modern times now, it can be quite divisive, and used as a tool to sort of like gain leverage over men, and create sort of more of like a hierarchical power. And it doesn't really sit well with me.
Yeah, funny you say that. You see a lot of the female influencers and podcasters that I've battled on, especially on social media, Twitter and Instagram, they will be saying, you've got internalized misogyny and you have no in-group preference. This seems to be the buzzwords and phrases that they're using now. I said, no, because we need more women like that. Because before, when I start like women like yourself, like, let's say lockdown times, they'd be like, Shaun, I don't really like feminism, me not really nada. But if I come put my head above the parapet, above the trenches, I said I could get my head blown off from the backlash and saying the same thing, no in-group preference, you're basically a sellout. Instead of, like it's usually the ethnicity, they're saying as a gender. And they said they don't want to get that, especially when in the, say, maybe the sector they work in, where it's female
Yeah,
dominated. And I said, oh, because I said there's men that's like that as well. I said, Sean, I agree with some of the things they're saying, but because of HR or, well, we'll be finished. But I
yeah,
think you're starting to move on now, and you're starting to see men talk up more and say, "Listen, this is not good enough." And there's a lot of problems with women in terms of morality and values as well, and that you don't always practice what you preach. And is it a power grab that you're trying to do, or are you trying to make us pay for historical injustices? And in the
exactly.
UK, they've got the thing with the Emily Pankhurst and the suffragettes, like in the Victorian era. So they're
Yeah,
saying, yeah, this is just the natural, fourth or is it fifth wave of feminism, and that's
yeah,
to increasing and improving their lot in the UK and in the Western world. Which I said, I've
yeah,
got no problem with that because I said some of the things that we've done, obviously just before I was born in the 70s, yeah, was embarrassing. Like what I said, in my mum's when she was a teenager wouldn't have been able to get a bank account if she was a bit older. If she was old enough to get a bank account them time there on her own, 18. She only missed it by 4 years where they were determined. I said, no, you have no husband or no male guarantor. So Jesus, in 1974. So no
yeah,
wonder
wow,
why Women's Aid and all them kind of organization came out in the UK then, because that's unbelievable.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
7, 8 years before I was born,
yeah,
women can't get. So yeah, it's embarrassing. I said obviously and some of that generation is still alive. So I said, man, I used to scratch my that's what made me volunteer for Women's Aid. But another man said,
yeah,
oh, you're a lady lover, you're a simp. I said, nah, because I'm trying to be thinking, me, I'm not gonna have, someone kind of override me. They're not my mother. Of course, I wouldn't
yeah,
have that. But obviously, if I do a misstep or do something wrong, or that is unjust, and I wouldn't want my mother or sister, my daughter to go through that. Well, I didn't have a daughter, but my mother or sister then. I said, I wouldn't like it. It's only natural.
mm,
It's a common law. Do unto others like you have done unto yourself. You reap what
exactly.
you sow. It's a calm. You lot love saying this, but then when it's certain elements and certain areas, you're like, nah, that goes out the window. So
Yeah,
then we open up ourselves to being called hypocrites and double standards. So I said we got to find a balance a bit, like you said, a bit better. But some tell
mm,
me, "Oh, Sean, you're a sim." Some say I'm a misogynist. So you can't make it up. You can't make it up. Mm,
yeah. I think also, like, I'm an advocate for sort of like independent thought and like being able to look at things critically
mm,
and just with logic. And I feel like there are so many movements that have been created, and so many initiatives where it doesn't. I feel like a lot of people now jump on the bandwagon about stuff and are not really thinking about things on a common sense level, or even just critically and thinking to themselves, actually, does this make sense, and can I not, it doesn't have to be all, doesn't have to be everything. So there are parts of things and legislation or whatever that makes sense, but it doesn't mean that just because we can pick apart certain things that we have to subscribe to the entire agenda. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Yeah, definitely.
so yeah, I think if we kind of approach life, I know it's obviously, it's not as simple as that, but if we have more of sort of like a holistic way of looking at things and be able to sort of like critically analyze things and look at things, as they come up, we don't have to sort of subscribe to everything just because it's popular or trending right now. So
Mm. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, I'm trying to be the change that I want, but it's not always easy. That's probably part of my struggles over the last couple of years still with that.
yeah,
Because with Equal Star, I got like a campaign, a lobby arm of it. So where I've all been on protest to the central lobby in Parliament with obviously big organisations and more serious activists. And then I've tried to do the volunteering at Women's Aid. I've done a bit of work with Mankind Initiative. I've been part of the consultation process for the family courts about parental alienation. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
saw.
allowing journalists to go in family law cases and say, look, this judge is not being fair. He's not, employing the law as it's written. He's putting up his own interpretation, and he's got discretionary powers, which undermines, say, his non-resident parents, which is mostly men, as you know. So, yeah, and it's quite worrying. And I'm thinking where people I thought were natural allies that I thought, yeah, I come into space. Surely you'd think they're like, huh? No, well, sure, you never get funded like that, or you'll never get any further with that because that's not really the narrative at the moment. Said, or that's you got to find another way in, and then you're gonna you got to simp a bit, or compromise. I said, yeah, I don't mind reasonable compromise, but not on my core principles. No way. No, no,
Yeah,
no. I said, yeah, no, no. I said, I'm like Benjamin Zephaniah with that.
yeah,
I'm not buying down in order to get a little popularity or a bit more money. Nah,
yeah.
that's not me. But I notice there's a lot of people like that in and
Mm,
around, the back end and behind the scenes. I said, my
mm,
word, so you're only doing it as for clickbait then and for talking. Because some of them are like, Sean, yeah, yeah, just because you do that doesn't mean what we're doing is any less serious. I said, yeah, in terms of awareness, is very good. But then if you're not prepared to think, then how can you whinge your moan and then be platforming people and then you want
exactly.
to say you're incel or you're a sellout or you're a simp. It don't make sense. So and this get money and things. Said then you start sounding like like the Tate figures and them way there. So I said,
Mm,
yeah, come on, man. You can't think you say knife crime 1 minute as well. Then no, 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 this is terrible. But then you're promoting washed up rappers that used to be gang when we were young, like 15, 20 years ago. That don't make no sense to me.
so, so
Mm,
how
but-
so
mm,
so based on I guess your stance and how you kind of view the world and like you're sort of like I don't want to call it unconventional, but you're not part of the majority, right? So
yeah, yeah, I'm not, definitely not.
how do you preserve sort of like not to go too deep with it, but how do you kind of like maintain and preserve your like your mental health and your sense of like sanity and being grounded in the midst of all of this? Because for me, I have to consciously have conversations with myself a lot
Mm,
about how the world is changing, how the majority view the world, the direction that it's going in, and me being an individual who doesn't really subscribe to a lot of the things that the majority do or take a different approach to how I look at things. And
mm.
sometimes that can be quite a lonely place to be.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so how do you sort of like navigate through that?
With me, well, I'm a deliberate man, so I vent. I'm
Mm,
talking to myself sometimes, even when I'm on my own in that shower. Yeah, yeah. Before I hurt my knee, I used to run in the park. I used to
mm,
run, and then I done a bit of boxing as well. Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's how I used to feel. And obviously, my close confidence, like my wife and my good friend Kingsley, he he's a good advocate for me, and he says, "Yeah, Sean, calm down and take it easy." When I
Mm,
was a bit younger, I had my friends Dwayne and Fitz. Yeah, so I had them have a little core confidence, like I call consiglieres. They used to
yeah.
remember what you're doing, and then I've
Yeah.
had some nice female advocates as well. A white Welsh lady called Sally Ann Berris. I don't
Okay.
know if you know her. She had a organization called Split the Difference, and I
No.
met her like 3, 4 years ago. I was aware of her from like 2018, 2019, but it's only from the work that I actually got close to where we could interact personally. And
Right.
through my Be World Champion course where I live in Merton Local Authority, there was another advocate I had called Debbie Dixon, and
Oh yeah.
she's a mixed race. She's like a mental health advocate. So she said, "Oh, Sean, I see that you do a little." Cause well, it's not an official podcast because it's not a studio. I do it from home on my laptop, and then I just record it on Zoom. She said, "Oh yeah, I'd like to be part of that." So I interviewed there, and then she said, "Oh, Sean, you should think about you see what the lobby arm. Maybe you should run a frontline service and try and share what you know around
Mm,
the research and the peer reviewed research that you've read up on and you've come across." I said, and do it like that, and said you might be able to make a living out of it instead of doing the maintenance. So
yeah.
yeah, there's people like that that I've met along the way in the journey.
Nice.
And William McGranagan at Dad's house, he was a good
Okay.
one as well. But he warned me, he said, Sean, this is not something that you think that you come into lightly, because he said men don't have an in-group preference. We're
Mm,
self-loathing. He said we do simp a bit, in order to be able to get along in life and have wife and kids. And they said
yeah.
we kind of lose ourselves. And then obviously society expects us to be the breadwinner like it's the Victorian era. But at the same time, you've got emotionally available and all this stuff. So I said, this is what we have to deal with every day with the people that are coming in are homeless, need help with their kids, need food. On top of those issues, he said that's why, you know. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot. But
Yeah.
I'm born to it still. I don't like injustice. It gets right on
Yeah.
my nerves. And that's to get whooped at home for sticking up for my siblings.
Mm,
And that's the battle with my dad over it as well. So I was like that from a younger boy, and
okay.
it's just manifested as I got older into the campaign and activism work.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good,
Yeah, so
man.
that's things still. You see with like misogyny, this thing about adolescence, this big, was it the best Netflix
Oh,
of all
yeah.
time?
Yeah.
And it seems to be the word of the moment. And then a lot of the radical feminists are coming out now and saying, see, this is what we mean. This is why we need the violence against women and girls policy. We need to have these men neutered. And the men that don't say anything have said, we're not part of the problem. They said, well, you're not protecting us, so you are. You're not being vocal enough and defending us on the streets. I said, you know what that involves? I said, so if persons say married, got their own children, and they step into an argument for a woman they don't really know, and they get beaten up. It doesn't go like then, like yeah, I've stopped it, or you know, it's had a positive outcome. You gonna look after them, or maybe give their children some money, or their wife or woman. You can do that,
Exactly.
yeah, for a
Exactly.
stranger. So I said, where's all this chivalry thing? This ain't the medieval times. I
Mm,
said, and she said, oh, well, you can say anything. I said, no, because I said, I'm someone that's been arrested for punching up someone in the street, attacking a woman, which I said,
mm,
oh, I said, yeah, it was stupidness because I run the risk of jail time. I said, also, I said, with my old dad, with my own father, in them kind of situations, I had two run-ins with him when I was 18 and 19 over my mum. So I said,
mm,
I've got lived experience. I said, I've
yeah.
been arrested for it as well. So I said, nah. So I said, there's no way you can tell me all this thing. I just know as I've got older, not to be trying to play the hero because I used to have a messiah complex. So I said,
Mm,
yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And my old man
yeah.
used to warn me, stop doing that because one day you're going to bite off more than you can chew. So I said,
Yeah.
I've got the thing and I've been reasonable where I've not really had anything bad happen to me. But I know someone that's been permanently brain damaged doing that, getting involved in an argument in the street. And I said, no one, they say, oh, he's lovely like Sasha Johnson. She's similar to her, but I said no one goes and looks about him. He's only his immediate family. So I said, yeah. So he got the little ramataz with the, oh yes, he's such a good man, but the practical support got ongoing ain't there.
Yeah.
So why
Yeah.
why would you think men would say, yeah, I'm going to step in for someone I don't
Yeah.
know, like and put my life on the line or well-being
Yeah.
on the line, health on the line for it? He said, no, you got to think.
That's-
Don't just
Yeah.
assume and reactionary, impulsive like a child. Yes,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? You should be doing that. You should be stopping the rapists, the assaulters, the abusers, the molesters. You should be thing. So no, it don't work like that. That's why we
Yeah.
have checks and balances and the system in place. Yeah, so but it's not always popular. Mm.
It's not. It's not. And I feel like it puts men, and this is an example that I'm referring to when it's like sometimes I feel like men get a bad rap because, you know, men are obviously the protectors, right? But you have to take calculated risks, and it's not about just being sort of like impulsive in a situation. Of course, you in a situation like that where a woman might be vulnerable or she might be subjected to domestic violence or whatever. Of course, as a man by nature, for the most part, you want to step in and you want to intervene and support her. But like you said, it's not as easy as that. You're putting your life at risk. You're putting,
Mm,
you know, you're putting yourself in a situation which could potentially disadvantage your wife, your kids.
mm,
They may not have their husband and their father come home because of the fact that you've decided to step in and interject and intervene in a situation where you're helping somebody else, and we don't know the mindset of the person that the
They might have
perpetrator,
a weapon. They might say,
you
yeah,
know.
if you do that, you're in trouble. Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, it
So
will. Go on, sir.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying. It is a risk, and I think that, you know, I think men get a bad rap when, you know, women a lot of the time have this sort of narrative that they kind of push out where they say that black men are not protecting black women. Of course, there are circumstances where that happens. Of course, there's certain language and certain rhetoric that's pushed out there on social media platforms or podcasts or whatever, where women are not spoken about in a necessarily positive way all the time. But that doesn't mean that, generally speaking, men don't protect women.
They do. I tell them all the time. I said, if we didn't, there wouldn't be so many of you on planet Earth. You
Exactly.
outnumber us. I said,
Exactly.
when you want DIY done, you call a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter. They most likely be a men. If it's
Yeah.
a police officer, it's mostly likely a male officer. If it's a
Yeah.
fire person, it's mostly likely a fireman.
Yeah.
So I said, you're not prepared to do them kind of trades in general. Obviously, there's always women that will do that. But in
Yeah.
general, that doesn't happen. When we go to war, most of the army's men. So I said,
Mm.
you've got to realize that. So where's this thing of you getting a warped sense of reality when you see it every day in your day-to-day lives? Even
Yeah.
I went to a kind of mental well-being camp in Greenwich just before my surgery in February, funny enough. I was on the tube, two white ladies pushed past me, and I think they're talking about some kind of partner. I overheard them and they said, "Oh, I hate men." And then what happened? They said, "Oh, what have we missed our stop?" I said, "No. It's Canary Wolf." I said, "Oh, thank you." In the next breath, I was shocked. After he said, "Oh, I hate men," you see it blatantly on the carriage, and said, "Huh?" So I said, "This is the kind of thing." I said, "Yeah, make if I did say that. You see, you
Yeah.
so incel, you misogynist
Yeah.
thing." Yeah, yeah, it's bad, man. And obviously that one there was a Karen, so yeah, but
Mm.
it's odd. It's odd, but then more of the sisters are doing that now. And I had to ask one the other day, one of fun enough a female podcast that I was on last year. There's a
Mm.
couple of them on there that we got along with, but there's one that said, "Oh well, I don't like some of your rhetoric." I said, "Why?" He said, "Oh, because you're saying men should, be autonomous and they should be leading and things." I said, "Yeah, in certain situations, of course. So only if they have
Mm.
the sense, though. If they are not up to it, then I don't mind female leaders." He said, "My mother run things when I was at home, even though my dad
Mm.
was physically strong and mentally weren't with it like her, and she was more
Right.
aggressive. So we all knew to defer to her judgment until we got older. Yeah.
Right.
So it's thing, but I said, but at the same time, if the girl don't have no sense, there's no way, and even if she got a big mouth and she's ratchet, I'm not
Yeah.
listening to her if I know
Yeah.
better. And it's proven. Why would I? So that became
Yeah.
the problem. And then she said, "Oh, the childbirth, oh, we died." I said, "This is not medieval times. Infant, women dying from pregnancy in the Western world is a very small risk to how it was
Yeah.
like 400 or 500 years, even 50 years ago." So I said,
Yeah.
That's not a thing for you to say." And said, "Is it not your child as well?
Yeah.
Well, you want to propagate your genetics so your legacy outlives you, your lifespan. That's the whole purpose, right?"
Of course.
You're conflating the idea. You're conflating the idea. You're deflecting. What is it? Whataboutisms? I said, "Oh, yeah, that's a cop out." I said, everyone says that. Come on, man. So I've come on your podcast. Stop being silly. I'm just saying. You got. And
Mm.
then said, when your children see this now, they're thinking, "Ah, does mum see me as a burden then?" And she
Mm.
just waiting for the next man that comes along. I said, "Come on.
Mm.
What do you think that does?"
Yeah.
Because we got this kind of sacrosanct thing that there's nothing like mother love and do you no, 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 you can never think because that's the person gave birth to you. I said anyone can be an incubator, just like anyone
Yeah.
can be a sperm donor. You forget these things. So bees
Yeah.
have, offspring in the wild, and some of them eat the offspring or they abandon them from early, even when before they can kind of run on their own.
Mm.
Said it's not like that with humans because we have, depth, nuance, sense, critical
Yeah.
thinking, and said I suggest you employ it. I said you
Yeah.
would like that if you was a man and you suffered injustice, you'd be complaining. But I can see it's always that closet thing. Oh yes, patriarchal control. You owe us, especially with like say the Karens. And I said, yeah,
Yeah.
you say all that. But I said if I was to turn around and say, listen, I want reparations for slavery. I'm
Them-
a direct descendant. Said, why are you talking about that? That's in the past. No, 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 no. I said, you see how I've caught you in your own trap.
Yeah. Exactly.
I said, and it's mental comb over. You see, that's like
Yeah.
growing up the hair and say, no, I'm not balding.
It is.
You
It
see?
is.
Yeah, yeah, it's mad. It's mad.
Okay, so you mentioned the term leadership in part of the conversation just a moment ago, right? And that was interesting because I had a conversation with some friends of mine the other day about that very same thing, leadership when it comes to relationship, and what that looks like for men and women in romantic relationships. And one of the things that we were kind of discussing was, I guess we were kind of unpacking what leadership looks like and the man should be whether the man should be the leader, or whether it's okay for a woman to be the leader in a relationship, and the effects of having either of those. Like, what are the no, I don't want to say repercussions because that sounds like something negative, but what are the effects of that? Um, and so I guess my question to you is, do you feel like, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, you feel like it's okay for the woman to be a leader? Because you mentioned obviously your mum historically was leader, and of that generation, that was the thing a lot for women of that generation. They took charge of the household, and even some financial issues and stuff like that. So do you think in modern times that it's okay for the woman to be a leader in a
Yeah,
relationship?
she has more sense. Remember, it's only
Mm,
because of the way my dad wasn't academic. He was a wise man, but he wasn't academic, and he
yeah.
didn't always practice what he preached. And my mum had a better way of to find employment, because a lot of the jobs my dad is either I helped him, or my mum, when I was young, when I was too young to help him, would help him
Mm,
find work. Even though when it came to consistency and being on time and punctual, he was serious like that. But
right.
the find thing, he found it hard, and he wasn't very good at writing. Yeah, so
Mm,
I could understand that. But then my maternal grandfather was a man that could fix his car, strip it down, fix it, but write like calligraphy.
right.
He could kind of farm. He knew how to make shoes.
Mm,
So he was thing. So, and then my paternal grandfather, he was a carpenter. He
okay.
was kind of meek and mild, and my paternal grandmother was more like ground thing, but he had like a
Right.
quiet strength. He didn't have to
Okay.
be really thing. He was kind of like a Vito Corleone instead of Michael. Yeah,
Right.
so I said, yeah, so it depends. I always think it depends, because the way I grew up, I wouldn't think it automatically. Like say Islam or Christianity said, yeah, man dominion, supposed to lead, physically stronger, by the sweat of your brow, earn bread. Women stay at home, raise the children because they're more maternal, naturally thing. In my
Yeah.
family, I never really saw that. A lot of the
Yeah.
women weren't really maternal. Their way they see, I have children, and they become like my serving maids, or boys, and they as they get stronger, they got to have more responsibility to take the pressure of me and the father if they were still together, and then
Right.
that's how it would develop. So I wasn't used to said, oh well, thing very conjugal roles, very strict. But even though my maternal grandfather was as they say, alpha male, he would, when my nanny was sick, he would make her dinner and things like that.
Yeah.
He would wash clothes. So it
Yeah.
was things. So I said that wasn't. It was kind of, even then. It was, they would say
It was,
fluid now. They would, yeah.
yeah.
So it's things. So because
Kind
people
of.
argue, that's your little bubble, Sean. That's not how it is among the wider population. But because I only grew up in that, I just assumed I'm an average person. So most people from my background would have that kind of balance as well. But only when I started to have friends and go out with girls and things, huh? The
Yeah.
foreign style, me not in that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't. What's a bit odd?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then think, yeah. Then I started. Oh, maybe I realized I lived in a bubble. And then
Mm,
when I did activism, it got big, and I was like, whoa,
right.
overload, sensory overload. Well, them things go on. I thought them things were only like on um Shameless and EastEnders. I didn't think these things happen in real life, really, unless it was exceptional, like care in the communities. So
Right.
yeah, yeah. So it's mad, to be fair.
Yeah. But I
Mad.
think it's interesting because there is obviously, like, it goes back to what we were talking about initially about sort of like gender wars and stuff like that. And I guess when we're talking about sort of leadership in relationships, and when women sort of take more of a leadership role in a relationship, for whatever reason that may be, whether it's based on, their character or circumstances or whatever, there is sort of like certain stigmas that come with it, particularly when we're talking about Black women, you know, and a lot of the sort of like women are
Yeah, it's
too
true.
combative or
Yeah.
headstrong, or
You need a bit
Don't,
of that, though. You need a bit of that. You do.
and yeah,
So
and
the world that you're facing.
yeah. But these are conversations that I had a lot on podcasts. And me being a woman of color, um, it's 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 quite a sensitive conversation, and it's quite an interesting one because I kind of understand it from both sides, and I kind of see how this whole sort of like leadership conversation, and when you unravel it, how it can, and how it's unpacked, how it can cause a lot of issues when it comes to relationships between men and women, particularly relationships with people of color, um,
I
and
agree.
the effects of it. So it's interesting. It's interesting because I was having that conversation the other day. So yeah,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You need all that, but what happens is that when it's out of balance and the women become belligerent, I notice they start kind of losing respect if they think you're too, copacetic and too back of the bus, and they
yeah,
start questioning your manhood, as they say, emasculating. And that's
yeah,
what leads to like a lot of the closet hatred and the misogyny. And because some of the arguments my parents used to have about money when my mum started earning more money, my dad used to carry on, and then he'd get threatening, and then when I got to like 18, I said that I can't work no more, things like that.
yeah.
So yeah, so it's thing is I can understand,
Balance.
but as I got to my mid-20s, I could see why my dad used to get like that. Because I said, yeah, some of the things my mum used to do to him, he said that's mad, throwing his
Mm,
clothes out on the street when he's running around, or he's gambling and she's afraid. I said, nah, I mean, if he done that to you, you wouldn't like it, and he's paying the
yeah,
mortgage. So yeah,
yeah,
the thing. And then as I started to campaign, and I thought, right, I'm not the only one, because I used to be a bit embarrassed about it. I said, but wait a minute, nah, Sean, that happens with me as well. I said, nah,
yeah,
it's a bit
yeah,
odd. And then the pressure they're under as well to stay employed, so they could keep a roof above our heads. So that kind of walked them. So sometimes they couldn't really bark at their manager at work, but they could come in and lash us because you're giving
exactly.
us talking. You ain't put your
Yeah,
shoes together. You ain't hang up your clothes properly.
yeah,
Like impatient, ratty with us. And then I
yeah.
kind of said, wait a minute, you see us kind of burden. Why do you have us so young then? Oh, you are
Mm,
talk to, you are talk to. You're more rank. You think me could tell my parents? Yeah, so it's
mm,
thing. And then my white mates had a bit of that, not so much, but they had a said, "Oh, so it's thing." And then some of my Asian friends said, "Yeah, you can't think." So I said, "Oh, it's kind of similar. Obviously, not all of them, but some of them." I said, "Yeah, well, I can more relate to that."
yeah,
That's the thing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So it's the thing is, and it's always been there, but it's only because of social media and like how people can walk in journalists now, like you said, on the phone, internet.
yeah,
Why you're getting this? Because before it's all microcosm, so you're thinking, I guess in general, people must be like that. But is it? Is it me just
yeah,
projecting what might have
exactly.
happening? But then I come across it more and more. And then I start to do like read peer-reviewed research by, like the top universities. Some of the
Mm,
stuff they've known about since my grandparents were like in their 30s. So I said, that's a bit odd. So why are you only now want to do something about it?
right.
Because we're shining light on it and basically embarrassing them.
Mm,
All right, we got to do something because we don't want to revolt because people are connected now. So
yeah,
they can ring up, do a WhatsApp and said, "There's 100 people in the group, and then we're marching on this statue or marching on
mm,
Parliament," and then that's it. So I said, "Yeah,
yeah,
we've got to find a middle ground and find a new way so we can kind of sow discord and misinformation and use colonial tactics to make sure they don't gang up on us because they're
yeah,
many, we are few."
yeah. So
So
yeah, but even it's even you, if we use you as an example, even you being married and being an active father
mm,
is like is I don't want to call it a rare thing, but it's something to be almost celebrated because it's almost unheard of in this time
you
for the
think so?
most part.
Yeah,
I
China kind of said that still, but I don't really
when I
think.
say being a parent or being an active father, I not so much that aspect, but
Mm,
more the
mm,
marriage side of it. Just I mean, when I talk about it, I mean like holistically in terms of everything, the foundation, having a partner and children, and that
mm.
foundation, that is not, in my opinion, something that's very common, particularly with Black men.
To be fair, my circle, my parents were married. Both my grandparents were married, well, both sets. But my dad's parents divorced while he was still young, so there was problems there. My dad had hang-ups about it. My mum's parents stayed together for what, over 50 years. And they're married for 40 of them. But yeah, and then my cousins, I've got a cousin same age as me. He's 40s. He's he's married. A South African Asian woman though. And there's a
Okay.
few people. One of my other younger cousins, he's in a long-term relationship. Yeah, so yeah, even the year I got married, my woman's brother got married as well. Her middle brother got married first, like in 2012. 2012? No,
Well,
2011. So yeah, no, to be fair, they say all that, but it's without the peer-reviewed research or people actually looking into it. I'm not sure because it might be later because people laughed at me and said, "Oh, Sean, you're getting married at 42. Jesus, is your second one?" I said, "Nah, nah, it's my first." So I said, "Bloody
yeah.
hell, what were you doing all that time? You got three kids." I said, "Yeah, well, the first one." So they had a bit of a mare with that one. I
Mm.
tried to get him my son full time from that relationship because the
Okay.
mother I didn't really rate what she's dealing with. But
Yeah, I think about it on
yeah,
China's.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the second one, this the second one I said I married her because I said she put up with my funny ways. She was kind of like my piece when I was going warring with the first one. And
Right.
then I thought, look, she's been with me for years. It's a bit my mockery. She got two kids for me. Yeah, we kind of, she got a place, I got my own place. I said, yeah. And then their parents were married, so I kind of felt the thing. Said, right, I wonder what her dad's thinking. I love you've been with her for how many years? And then you
Yeah.
ain't thing. I said, yeah, yeah. This. I said, it's a natural progression. I said, obviously, the stability, because my second son started to question about that. I said, oh, Dad, I noticed you're not married to mum. So I said,
Mm.
yeah. And they said, look, and then obviously my parents are married. So I said, yeah, it's only a natural progression. It's better for the stability as well. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's better for the stability. Mm.
It,
Even though I did
it
like my single, I did like the campaign in life, to be fair. Yeah, so a
is.
lot
Say
of
that.
my cousins said, I'm surprised, Sean, you think? Yeah, I liked the campaign in life when I was younger. I did.
Mm.
So it's thing, but I said, yeah, you can't do it forever. And then obviously I said, when I had my daughter, I said, boy, yeah, that can't
It's
really
changed,
run. Yeah, that can't
right?
really run. Yeah, it's thing. So, yeah, so it's not a thing like, oh, yes, like I'm a church man. Well, I was a church man, but I wasn't like, virgin, married.
Mm.
Then I have
No,
children. Then I think, yeah, yeah. So remember, that's why I look at as like the epitome for me. So I said I wasn't being judged. I said, look, I'm a husband and I've got a
but
wife. You're
that's
just lesser. I don't look it like that. Mm,
that's idealistic route to like to approach in life. That's not really reality for most people. Most people have to
mm,
go through certain things to learn certain lessons to be able to come out on the
mm,
other end and document your progression, so it's kind of even more um it's kind of even more credit to you because you didn't go down that because you didn't go the conventional way, but you still ended
mm,
up at the same place.
mm. I know, but it's thing. It's if I'd stuck to what my old man and to be fair, my mother told me, said, listen, don't have any girlfriends. Sort
Mm,
yourself, your education first out and money first before you can even consider doing all that.
mm,
Yeah, and then obviously when I started to become promiscuous, my mum said, "Stop running around with these floozies and embarrassing yourself." Said, "Listen, thing." And I said, "Nah, nah, nah. I'm not gonna be locked up for all them years like you and Dad from like what you both 15 and that." And I said,
mm,
"Nah, nah. I'm not doing that." Jesus. I said, "Yeah, yeah. That's a bit thing." I said, "Unless I've got a virgin bride, I'm not doing all that." I'm
yeah,
gonna experience and see what's out there. I said, I don't know what I like in terms of lifelong partner. I want to see what's out there and what kind of mindsets I like, and obviously
yeah,
the different looking women as well. So I said, yeah, but I'm not doing that. And then obviously that it backfired in my face with my first son. My first son's
mm.
mother. So I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't want no more of that. I said, Jesus. I said, I'll be in a mental institute. So I said, yeah, yeah. So I said, yeah. That's the drawbacks of it. The campaigning.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't think with that, and I notice more women are willing to do that now and say, yeah, they can carry on like us and do that. I said,
It,
yeah, but then you got the extra emotional baggage, and then you're carrying the children. So don't you think of the but and they're like, no, no, no. Well, why should I be unhappy? So I say, yeah, but you got to kind of balance it. It's not always going to be like cotton candy and Walt Disney. These
it,
unrealistic expectations, like what you're saying. But some of them, no, I don't care. I'm not settling. I'm not settling. So I said, boy, I said, you're becoming like the Americans now, yeah, dating and OnlyFans and some of these stupid shows where you're running around and we look like fools. And I said, the Caucasian people are probably laughing. I said, see, look where we told you about them. We told you about these kind of people.
Yeah,
Barrett, yeah, said all that and said, yeah, it's performative and
yeah,
it's stupid. It makes it look stupid.
yeah.
Mm,
It's very actually very damaging. But, yeah, man. Yeah.
mm. So have you thought, what about yourself? You ever gonna go down that route? You think?
Well, I was engaged actually before, to my son's dad.
Mm,
We were 10 years, met him when I was 18. We were together for 10 years and we were engaged. Um, but I always said that, I only want to get married once in my life. And so it has to be right. It has to be the right person. And although my son's dad is a wonderful person, he just wasn't my person.
mm,
And so, we still maintain a very, very healthy co-parenting relationship. Um, but yeah, it just needs to happen once for me. And I'm not sort of like prepared to jump into marriage. My parents were married for 30 years, so I grew up in a house where that was kind of normal,
you know what I mean? Mm,
that was aspirational. So, it's something that I've always wanted, and believed that I kind of deserve based on the kind of person that I am as a woman.
mm.
But
Yeah, you
yeah,
seem balanced to be fair. Some of
yeah,
the things I've spoken to with terms of like podcasting, like they start off very kind of clinical and like sensible, but then you reprobe them a bit, and all of a sudden, yes. I said, yes, yes, you demon. Confess it, confess it. Yeah,
you,
yeah, it's not hard to think, but you seem to be thinking. When I watched your other podcast, I said, "Raw, she's very considerate." And even when you had the opportunity, when it's a all female panelist, I said, "Yeah, well, yes, you're right.
yeah,
I agree with you. There's too much misogyny, toxic masculinity." But he's like, no, no, some of the things I just don't really agree with. And there, you've got to be, certain men have these struggles in society, and we got to look at that. And I was
yeah,
surprised because
yeah.
did you see my interview with Natalie Campbell, the lady that was going to be running for London Mayor last year?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I sent that to you, fun enough.
Yeah, please
She's
do.
fig. She went on, what her name? Your aunties could never.
Oh yeah.
One of them I used to go to Lambeth College when I was a teenager with one of them. So I was
Okay.
shocked. I said, "What? You're not gonna think?" I said, "No, I could tell because of my views." And then I
Yeah.
said, "No, no, that's not true because I've looked into that and that's propaganda." They didn't like that, so I was never gonna get a look in there. But she brought on the mayor candidate, which she said, "How did you think before me?" I said, "Because I said I'd vote for her." I said, "What? You're gonna run for mayor as an independent?" I said, "You won't win, but just for you being a black woman, I would support that." So I done the
Right.
little leafleting for her in my borough. I said, listen, she needs 10 things to be able to say she can run. She needs 10, like, basically, like, kind of like proxy votes. So
Yeah.
she said, yeah. So she came down and gave me like a shirt. I was shocked. I said,
Nice.
what? Yeah, she came and made me there where I live. So I said, yeah, yeah, I was thinking. So I said, that's how I said, look, can you do a thing for me? Because I've started to do this little Zoom call thing and I've recorded it and throw it up online and see if I can showcase like the kind of activism work I do. As I said,
Course.
people Sean, you do a lot of work behind the scenes, but they won't see it. So it's like a stop, look, and listen sign, kind of like your hero, Muhammad Ali. So I said, yeah, it's true. He only
And
used
it's
to
been
do that, you know?
a long time,
Hmm?
but even I'm only learning even in this very, very, very first phone call that there's so many things I didn't know that you did, and I've been speaking to you for a while now, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah, I know a couple of years. Hmm.
Yeah, you did. There's so much that you do.
Yeah, yeah, I try to. But yeah, she was thing. She come on thing and there, and soon as she went on that podcast though, she's doing that. Was it Man versus Bear?
Okay, yeah.
I said, huh? So I thought she's gonna be like you, like, oh, well, I would be safer with a man than a bear. Even though she did drop that in, she was like, "Oh, but I can understand why women would pick the bear." So I said, "Oh Lord,
God,
Jesus,
here we
oh, you
go.
let me down. You let me down,
Here
man."
we
It's their time to stand up and be strong, especially as the senior woman there amongst them. But no, it's thing. But I could tell, obviously, she's in a in group and she don't want to look like she's selling out the feminists that would vote for her. So I can understand it. So she
go.
tried to walk the middle road.
Yeah, play the
Yeah,
fence. Like,
yeah. But yeah, I don't do that. See, like when them man were trying to like, look, yeah, it's the man them now, Sean, with China. It's the man them now. So if he said, nah, I've done a bit of campaigning, I've done a bit of my dirt with all that, but said in the main, these things are no good in it, and we got to condemn it. And said, and as much as we say, yeah, like black women are combative, they, some of them are materialistic. I said, trauma from slavery, we don't take up to our responsibilities. we tell them sweet nothings and then we don't deliver. So some of
Right.
us, we're not capable, but we want to
Everybody.
mother us. So to distress and then I'd have to mind children as well and go to work and do business. Of course,
Yeah.
it's gonna impact your mood and your morale and whether she wants to treat you well. So that you got to look at these things. I'm not saying it always works, but you give yourself a better starting point and more chance to be progressive with them if you can take that into consideration. No, 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 you're simple, man. I said, no, no, it's not. I said, I'm not like you, man. When I tell girl it's over, or I said, listen, you do that, I'm off. Or I said,
Yeah.
listen, I should tell them my advice is football, liquor, and women. So I said, if you can't think with that, don't bother. So I said, yeah, you man say all that when you're in your little thing, but I told him, I'm with them. I said, look, I'll have my wife there. She tell you, said, look, this is how when I met her. This is what I said that with our first one. I'm not looking for nothing like that. So I said, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not like you, man, where she ain't there. Oh, no, no, baby. Oh, that was wrong. Sorry, you called me. I didn't. Yeah, I don't do that. But I said at the same time, I would say, listen, yeah, I done effed up there. I done
Yeah.
that thing, you see, I should have. I went and had a child with someone that I knew wasn't appropriate. I was a fool anyway. You see,
Yeah.
they said, yeah. So I said, you have to take things. You talk about these buzzwords, accountability, take responsibility. But when it comes and the boots on in your backside, all of a sudden, no, no, it's like excuses or no, it wasn't like that. He said you can't because then you don't. You're telling women that. But
Yeah.
then when it's you, it's different.
Different.
Mm,
Yeah.
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 So that's what you come across, and I don't like it. But I
A lot.
think that's why I'm not. When I'm with them people there, they're like, oh well, we'll have him when we can't get someone in,
Yeah.
or we want to stir up some controversy to have like kind of like a online kind of battle, like a clash. But
Yeah.
in the main, no, no, which I can
Yeah.
understand. That's why I'm trying to do this thing
Yeah.
with myself and my own people, so that way I
Yeah.
don't have to be waiting to be invited on or things like
Mm.
that.
That's what it's about. That's what it's about. That's what
You
it's
see the
about.
stuff that you do when you go abroad, though. Like, I think, do you do any of that when or is it basically just the community stuff, like with Windrush and?
Yeah, it's funny. So like in 2017, I started my own um company. It was a sort of like charity, and actually it wasn't really a charity. It was kind of, I didn't actually register it, but it was a community-based organization called the People Versus,
Okay.
and started it with my friend at the time, and it was basically just to essentially kind of do stuff like this. So like um before podcasting was like really popular, we had started doing a podcast. We would put on events, community-based events where we'd have Black scholars from the UK and the US and Africa come over and sort of like give lectures and talks and stuff like that. We'd highlight Black entrepreneurs. And it was really just to kind of like galvanize the community in a way, and shed some light on some like really great people in the community that are doing stuff that didn't really get the exposure. So I've always kind of been that way inclined. Um, and so the stuff that I do, it kind of varies. So like I like to do a lot of articles and like a lot of coverage on Windrush and a lot of issues relating to like black matters and like race relations and stuff like that.
Mm,
Stuff that's happening politically. So even things like what's it called now? Critical race theory in the US and a lot of stuff around that stuff I think is really interesting to me. And that's kind of just who I've always been. My dad is a lawyer, and he used to do like a lot of lectures at Middlesex University around like diversity within the legal system and stuff like that, and the law profession, and so he's kind of always been like very instrumental in my life and kind of like I guess my reason for being so interested in the community and things that happen, when it comes to Black people and sort of like think legislations and all that kind of stuff. My dad is a Garveyite,
okay.
so teachings and stuff, and my interests and my political stance comes from him. I was learning about Malcolm X when I was 9 years old, 8 years old, going
That's
to,
it. That's it.
by the time I was in secondary school, no one couldn't chat to me about my people and leaders. And you know what I mean? I knew stuff that my other peers didn't know. I understood what racism looked like, covert racism.
Mm.
Um, I knew the microaggressions. I knew what stuff like this, was from an early age and stuff like that. I understood, the language that was used, covert language that was used to talk to Black students in comparison to like my white counterparts. And so
Mm.
yeah, so I've always kind of like had an interest in um matters that kind of affect us and trying to be, I don't want to call myself an advocate, but um just more of like a voice, and someone who's just very instrumental in trying to like push culture forward in the right way. Um so yeah, I don't really sort of like have a definitive answer for you, but I just kind of
Well, that's serious
do
stuff, though.
resonates with me.
Yeah, I'm trying to
So
connect. See stuff like that. I'm trying. That's why I asked Richmond how long he knew you because I said, look, I'll come and buy some stuff from your shop. I said, look, I sell a little jerk seasoning now that I'm off from work after the knee surgery. So I said, yeah, we can do like collaboration and so maybe do like a podcast live event in the venue I was telling you about. I said, do we get a couple of more prominent podcasters? We have a little panel. We talk about the kind of stuff we're talking about now. So we use the money, maybe send it back home or to
yeah.
Africa, maybe dig a well, something like that. I said that's eventually I want to do with this kind of stuff, like kind of group. What remember Dr. Umar Johnson with the group economics? He said how much times he spend money in our community before it goes out to other ethnicities. So I said, yeah, I'm practicing that. But then I noticed when I go to a lot of these black business shows and you can smell the poverty and the desperation and some of the silliness like I done in my first public speaking engagement in October last year. And fun enough, the lady there that's running, you might know her, Katie Wilson. She does a Windrush thing where she gets people to fill out the application so they can get compensation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I see.
so she told me to come and speak there, but I went there, not big money, but I spent about £70 there with the vendors and that. And I thought,
Mm,
Katie, you couldn't let me come in and have a little stall so I could sell my little jerk and that. 'Cause I said I'm
yeah.
talking for free. And she's like, oh well, it's a big opportunity to network and all that. I said, really? I said, I see a couple of network marketing people like remind me of ACN and like the old church when they said, oh, come in and bring in a friend and then make sure what you put in the basket. But then said they're asking for money from poor people, destitute. How does that work? And then obviously some of the business people I can tell are charlatans. So I said, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, come on, that's man. And then some of them I said getting a little juice and I don't have a card reader. I said, even I got a card reader. You see? I said, what about if I send it by bank transfer? No, 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 cash. Huh? But I said,
red
you got
flag.
this big bio that you're doing this. Yes. I said, no wonder why it was after all these years. It's been like this in my parents' day, and it's still like that now, 40 years on. So I said, so that's why they laugh at us. I said, oh, we do these one-off events, holding up, and then,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, get
yeah,
everything. It's,
yeah.
can't do that. So he's got to be progressive and consistent. And obviously, as my grandmother said, one coconut full basket. Said we got to
Mm,
think. We spend money. We use the services where we can only within this circle, and then we expand it and get other people involved, more
yeah.
organized, better facilities. Little space. And then there's always some kind of infighting or ego checks or like, oh, I don't rate them again or oh, they're con merchant. I said, yeah, but they say you're con merchant. Yeah, it's
Mm,
a ways going. Then we talk about this black unity and all the theory and academia and said, where's the practical action? Where's the deed?
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so
For a long time.
even with that BLM thing that you're talking about, I remember when my woman gave thing to when Fernando Castile got shot. And then she don't said no. I said I'm not sure about that, 'cause I said I've seen their kind of mission statement, and they're saying
Mm,
they want to kind of abandon nuclear family structures, queer theory, kind of similar to critical race theory. You
okay.
remember a researcher called Michael Foucault? He's like French. So I said
Yes.
what they call is intersectionality, where the overlap of small minority groups kind of combine forces to become a bigger political voice. So, but at the time they're saying that, so look at what they're saying
Yeah.
abandon nuclear families and capitalism. I said, black capitalists bring money to the community. So I said, how can you abandon that? I said, I'm by philosophy. I said, I'm a socialist, but I know we need black conservatives and black capitalism. How are we going to create our own wealth then? We're always going to be funded and needing Hannah. No, 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 no. I said, then why would you want to break the nuclear family? That doesn't make any sense. So I said, yeah, I'm not into that. I'm not into that. So because of that, some of the right wing or my male white friends are like, oh, Shaun, you ever thought of Arts of Oak then? We can help with your dad's stuff. So I said, yeah, that's all right. I said, well, I went one rally in Manchester, I think 2 days before lockdown, before they said everyone's got to stay inside. I went up there, Union Jack man in the army, uniform. I must have been one Asian man with me, one mixed race man, and then one of my white mates from Nottingham. And they're like, Shaun, you gonna talk? So I said, huh? Nah. He said, what do you mean? Is he gonna talk? I said, so you're not gonna kill me. I'm not gonna go out there and talk. And these rallies said, you're thinking. I said, yeah, but Shaun, we don't like, the Jimmy Savile types. What you're talking about. Remember, with your first son? I said, no, what? With them, man. They said, nah, no way. I said, and then I'm not gonna say it because I knew about the grooming gangs before it became popular with this Maggie Oliver and all these things. Said we
Yeah.
the man about 7, 8 years ago. So I said, listen, I would say grooming gang, but I'm not gonna say Asian grooming gangs. No way, because
Right.
I said I got Pakistani friends. That don't make no
Mm.
sense. They say, sure, what you doing up there being a sellout? So I said, no, no, I'm not doing it. I said, sure, why you come up here then? I said, yeah, because I innocently thought I talked to a couple of your speakers and
Yeah.
they helped me sign my petition, come out on a couple. So I said, yeah, I will reciprocate. But then you think, I never knew it was like this.
Mm.
No, no, I said, I'm not. I said, all right, if you're gonna do that, I said, we got to call out the Catholic priests and Anglican priests that are buggering.
Yeah.
How can and statistically, this is England. We're
Yeah.
minorities here. We don't make up 15% of the population with all of us combined. So how can they be its only thing, grooming gang?
Yeah.
That's not. So think about it. You just said Jimmy Savile. He's not
Yeah.
talking, is he? Say, come on, man. But yeah, I went back home with my tail between them. They were funny with me.
Yeah.
Went to the pub and I said, look at this. See, I thought you things, Shaun. You're so close. Because they used to like as well. I said, listen, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back home to Africa. I'm going back to Africa. Marcus Garvey started. I said, yeah, sure. I could never get away with that, Shaun. I could never get away. They say I'm a racist. I said, no, no, it's all right with me. I'm not one of them ones that, feel I'm inferior and I've
Yeah.
got a kind of car. I said, yeah, I don't mind if you don't want me. I said, I will. When I make enough money here, and the money that I've given you, I will. And then find out, and they said, yeah, yeah. So why not? I said, if you're gonna be like that, I'll think. But they were like, yeah, she see Shaun. I said, no, but on the father's thing, I agree with you, but not on the race thing, no. And you're not gonna try and draw me in by
I,
finding middle ground and then
I,
like, oh, wrote me in like I'm an overseer. No, no. So yeah, so that's the next season why that never took off. But then
yeah.
I clashed with the BLM acolytes and they're like, oh, see, your thing with them people there. I said, yeah, because I like the father's thing. I agree with them.
Mm.
And they said, oh, I guess you're another brother Malcolm. I said, huh? Brother Malcolm, you might cuss me for this though. I said, I know you're not calling me a brother Malcolm. I said, I'm gonna tell you something, yeah? If you're gonna criticize like white people for slavery and racism, historically, yeah? And Irish people, like your Irish friends, moan about that too. What do you expect? You gotta have some empathy, because then you just
Yeah.
drive people away. Yeah? I said I'm black and proud, but I have empathy for other groups that think. It's the only we're a minority. We're not gonna have no say in no government if we don't think. But I said at the same time, I'm gonna tell you this for real. I said, listen, as a black man, Malcolm X can't chat to me. So,
Mm.
what are you talking about? I said, I'm telling you. I said, don't look at the celebrity thing and the Muslim thing. I never ran around no Detroit, call myself Detroit Red, running around with white women and pimping. I never did that. And not one time in my life did I do these things. Not once. You understand me? Not once. I said, you can ask about me. No one can tell you. He said, yeah, I see Shaun going out with that woman. I said, that's never happened. Never. So as a black man, Malcolm X, even though he's bigger than me in the thing, the activism and popular and done bigger things than I ever have. But I said, as a black man, he couldn't. Man, like I'm from the root to the fruit, from the cradle to the grave, and that's deliberate. That's not by accident. It's deliberate. So don't mention that to me. I said, and I'm gonna ask you, how much white women have you dealt with? He went, what's your angle? So I said, you're there in BLM group telling me thing like the what's about a protest group, and then you're telling me about Brother Malcolm, and then you're telling me that. When I asked
Wow.
you how much white women you deal with, I said, come on, Rasta. He said, you can't chat to me on this. You see on this thing,
Yeah.
I'm battle brand. So yeah, that
Yeah.
made him regulate. And then the women were like, oh, why did you do that? You never had to be so harsh. I said, I had to because the bread is telling me in front of people
Yeah.
that I guess I'm a brother Malcolm because I'm improvising with the Irish.
He set you up. He set you up to say that. You had to defend it.
But yeah, they were shocked when I said that as a black man, full chest, that I said, I'm more serious than Malcolm X. A lot of them man there, they can't chat.
I'm a Malcolm X fanatic. So,
Yeah,
but even,
that's why I said you might cuss me, you might cuss me.
well, I was getting ready. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
left. But I can't even argue with your point. I can't, there's nothing I can say about that. It's because you're 100% right. And, you know, everything that you've said in regards to that point is something that I always advocate for all the time anyway. So,
Mm.
you know, I have nothing to say.
See, so yeah, I'm all right then. I'm all right. So it's thing going forward. What is your schedule like with thing? How many podcasts are you doing now? Because I'm trying to put together like a team of I'm calling unheralded heroes. So
Okay.
instead of these podcasts where you got the washed up like gangster rappers or drill grime former grime artists talking about business and man is soft and they need
Yeah.
to do thing, so they can't lead no community to no economic freedom. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not thing. They would get you to like, oh, you like my music, pay a little money, then the money goes out the door, or they get high up and then they got McDonald's adverts. Yeah. Supporting regimes they say they disagree with in order to get the money. So I said, look,
Yeah.
you need to
Compromise.
have the everyday person that may not be so popular, but they're doing progressive things behind the scenes. I said, I want to shine a light on that and then
Yeah.
find out who's amongst them that we can kind of ally and say, look, I'm doing this. Can you help with that? What do you need? Can I help you with that? And then we find a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Mm.
my schedule at the moment, I got some free time, definitely. So,
Is it
yeah.
regular? Is it like you fly out regular, or because your PR work you have to go abroad and or you have to type up certain times?
Necessarily, not necessarily. It's just as and when, but I sort of like I kind of manage my own schedule, so
Oh,
it's
that's
not.
good. Yeah, yeah. See, that's always nice. Yeah, that's
So
always good.
yeah, so that's
Yeah, well,
fine.
I'm definitely gonna need your advice then. And going forward, I'd like to have as one of the permanent panel members.
Yeah, no, that would be cool.
Yeah. I'll send you a thing of the team and that because you know
Yeah,
the parent dilemma group that I placed you in.
yes.
There's Princess in there. There's my wife. There's Samia. She's from Mombasa, Kenya.
Okay,
There's someone that's got university with as well called Natasha Smith. She's kind of like a journalist. She's got like
okay,
a little trucking business and that,
okay, nice.
and a community interest company called Messiah. Then
Okay,
there's my friend Kingsley, my good friend Kingsley. He helps me with Equal Star,
yeah,
and who's the other person? I got my cousin in there as well now, my cousin Jason. So we're trying to think from there, and we've been talking about it, like obviously in conversation. But I said, yeah, it's good to talk about it to attract more people and shine a light what we do. But I said we need to have more official them and constructive ways of raising our own revenue instead of using our wages or salary to constantly raid it, and then we're kind of short at home. So I said if we can find a way to combine our business efforts and then so it doesn't have to be solely reliant on employment or funding from the master, so where they can say, you know what, you're biting the hand that feeds you, will pull the carpet from out underneath you. Yeah, so
yeah,
that if we can get around that in the meantime and start creating our own revenue stream, like with the little events, the subscription, the merchandise, like what the rappers do and things like that. So we
mm,
might be able to start creating our own revenue streams without having to rely on that and
definitely.
having to top it up with our wages. So it's putting you
Yeah,
under pressure at home. You don't want that.
yeah.
So you'll be all right with that then? As a girl, be all right. See, that's serious. See, I never knew that. That's a serious thing. Lawyer, dad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
see, you see, we need more people like that in the movement. See, I'm trying to do what Dr. Umar talks about. Mm.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I
definitely.
think I'll be in touch. And
All
thanks for
right,
coming on today.
no problem, no problem. Yeah, I'm
And
around.
just to wrap up, where there's people, there's power. Fred Hampton. Justice in our
Definitely.
time. Have a good evening.
Take
Yeah.
care.